Hello, listeners!
And welcome to
Dad and Me Love History.
Dad and me love a whole lot of history. We could be the greatest team that the world has ever seen. Dad and me love a whole lot of history.
Today, we're looking at...
Who invented computers?
James, what's your first memory of a computer or a computerized device?
I remembered phones first, then iPads. I don't know. Phones is first.
That's what you remember first?
Yes.
Yeah, because obviously they didn't get invented in that order, and we didn't have a smartphone until you were about 2, I would say, 2 or 3 maybe. Of course, you loved it then. It could distract you at times. You used to watch cartoons on it in the car. Do you remember? No? You used to watch like Tom and Jerry and things like that. Mickey Mouse. You were still watching them when you were about 5 or 6. Anyway, I remember my first memories really are from the early 1980s. A friend had a ZX81, which was a tiny computer, and then a Sinclair Spectrum, which had rubber keys, and then there was Christmas 1984, the best Christmas ever. I was 11 years old, and my present from my grandparents and parents together was a Commodore 64 home computer. Oh yeah. So in that Commodore 64 computer, to play games, the games were on cassette tape, like an audio tape. So you had a little cassette recorder or player that you'd plug into the computer, and if you didn't damage the tape, because they would get damaged over time, you could load up games. It only took about 10 minutes to load a game or something. Can you imagine today's kids waiting that long? As you can probably tell from James's voice, he's not feeling 100%. He's been away on camp where he did things like kayaking in the cold and rain. And whilst he's been away, I've done some digging around and found out about the history of computers. Would you believe me, James, if I told you that the first computers existed 2,500 years ago?
No.
No. So what we're talking about is an abacus. It was used by the ancient Babylonians.
What's a Babylonian?
Good question. So Babylon, this is 2,500 years ago. So Babylon today is close to Israel and Saudi Arabia and Iran. So ancient civilization of Babylonia, they invented the abacus, but we also found them in ancient China. We know they had them about the same time, 2,500 years ago. Probably made out of wood and string back then, sometimes plastic, more recent years. And you'd slide along the little kind of like balls on a bit of string when you wanted to add one on. Do you remember an abacus? Yeah, okay. So another word for calculations is computations. If you're computing something, you're calculating it. An abacus can't do all of the calculations that an electronic calculator can do today, but it can help with adding and subtracting.
There are drawings by Leonardo Da Vinci of mechanical calculators. He was a sick mathematician as well as an artist.
In fact, I can show you. So here are his actual drawings. Cogs in a machine. The machine itself wasn't actually made until more recent years. It wasn't made during Leonardo's lifetime.
What was it helping it for?
To add and subtract. Of course, he only drew the calculators. If he made one, we don't have it today, so he didn't survive through to today, so we don't think he made one. But historians disagree on which early machines should be called computers. Many say the castle clock, invented by Al-Jazari in 1206, is the first known programmable computer.
The Islamic golden age shone with the brilliance of many men and women. One in particular was Badi al-Zaman Abul Ez ibn Ishmael ibn al-Razaz al-Jazari.
It's quite a name.
Born in the 12th century in Al-Jazari, Mesopotamia, now southeast Turkey. An extraordinary engineer of his time.
So we just watched a video which included a computer animation and reconstruction of Al-Jazari's clock. He made that 800 years ago, 300 years before Da Vinci's drawings. It was the first actually made device, not just a drawing, that used cogs and gears and that, to make its machinery work. What did you think of what you saw, James?
Well, before I explained it, I got confused, how did it work?
Yeah, it's got a cog system inside. It also uses water to slowly move certain things along. It's very complicated. His clock showed the orbits of the stars, the movements of the sun and the moon, and the length of the day and the night that could be changed or reprogrammed every day in order to account for the fact that the length of the day of daylight, changes throughout the year. So yeah, it was really really complicated, but impressive bit of machinery. It's known as the first programmable analog computer. That just means analog just means it's not digital, it's not electronic like today's devices. The first machines that could answer maths questions pretty much on their own were invented about 400 years later in the 1600s. They did addition and subtraction at first, but later machines could even do multiplications. And they used the techniques of cogs and gears, like gears and cogs you get on a bicycle, those ideas that were first developed by Al-Jazari. Anyway, other people say the first computer was invented by Charles Babbage. In the 1820s and 1830s, using some of Jacquard's ideas, English mathematician Charles Babbage came up with a plan for a machine that was powered by a steam engine that stays still, not one on a train. So it's nearly always mathematicians who are involved in inventing computers. It really is it's a maths thing.
Charles Babbage was the only child of a tyrannical London banker, a bully at home. But his money kept his son in...
So we just watched a video on Babbage. What did you make of what you saw?
I think he's kind of a copycat.
Who do you think he was copying?
Da Vinci.
Yeah, it does look, when you look at Da Vinci's drawings that we were looking at earlier, it looks very similar to Babbage, right? The cogs and the gears. And they all copied each other. And that's what scientists do. They look at what ideas that everyone else has come up with before, they take it and they try and add something to it, try and improve it, try and make it a little bit different, a little bit better. And that's what's been happening through history. From the abacus right up to these calculating machines and onwards, as we're going to see.
We love history. We love history, baby. We love history.
And now we go to an advert break for parents.
The Slightest Chance is my latest World War II thriller love story based around real history. After the Japanese won the Battle of Hong Kong, a young English woman named Gwen, who was a real person, was the only female to escape from a Japanese camp, and she did so on foot, and then faced an 800-mile journey across occupied China. By the end of this novel, you will have learned all about her extraordinary adventure and how Gwen was secretly carrying information which the very top of the British government would use in the fight against Imperial Japan. Also from real history, included in the novel is the mass breakout led by a one-legged Chinese admiral, and then there's the Japanese guard, Kiyoshi Watanabe, whose Christian faith pushed him to risk his life helping Japan's enemies. Find out more at poorletters.com. The slightest chance when your enemy is your best friend.
Dad's new novel is coming out into shops in some countries. For details, go to poorletters.com or click on the link from dadandmelovehistory.com. It is now available to order online at all the usual places or order it directly from the publisher Blacksmith Books. Books.
Babbage's machine had four main parts. An input where you'd input numbers, a processor, the kind of like main machine that worked things out, even a memory. I'm not sure how that worked. This wasn't electronic, but it remembered what you put in. Oh, in fact, of course, it recorded it. We saw it had an output, a printer, and it actually kept a record, not just on the printout, but in the kind of machine itself, of all the numbers that had been put into it. These four components are still a part of all computers today. And that's why people say Babbage devised the first computer, even if it wasn't made till like 100 years after he died. In the 1930s, working in Hitler's Germany, Konrad Zuse invented what may have been a proper computer. It was electronic and mechanical. Known as Z-series computers, his inventions were calculators that had memory and that you could program at least a little bit. Hitler didn't realise how important Zuse's inventions were and how they could help win the war for Germany. Zuse did not get enough help from the German army. He was inventing computers that would make guided missiles, like remote control missiles, so you could make them land precisely where you wanted them to. If Germany had had those, when no one else did, they could have won the war. Meanwhile, in the UK, during World War II, Alan Turing worked with some other brilliant mathematicians at Britain's secret code-breaking hideaway, Bletchley Park. Radio messages were sent by secret code during the war, so the enemy could not know what the messages meant. It was Alan Turing's job to invent a machine that could break the German codes, which were made by a German machine called the Enigma. So Alan Turing and others created the first proper programmable electronic computer, which they called Colossus, an ancient Greek word for giant. This computer was huge, and it worked, which meant the British knew all the secret plans the Germans were saying over the radio, so Britain knew what the Germans were going to do before they did it. And that helped Britain's side win the war. And James, we saw Colossus, I don't know if you remember, we went to Bletchley Park.
Yeah.
While Colossus has lights to indicate operation, it does not have a monitor-style display. Rather, final output is directed to this electric typewriter.
So Colossus had like a typewriter output, so like a printer. It also used a kind of punch card idea, although it was on paper tape that it would read sort of information off. So what did you make of Colossus, James?
I think it was useful because it was like a coding machine.
Yeah, a decoding machine.
Yeah.
Go on.
It decoded the radio messages from Germany.
It pretty much was what we call a one-trick pony. It could do one job. But man, that was an important job, and it did it well. So, we'll come more up to date now. In the mid-1970s, the first personal computers small enough to have in your home, were made by different companies, including IBM, Altair, and Commodore. In 1975, two childhood friends, Paul Allen and Bill Gates, started writing software for the Altair computer. Then on April 4th of that year, 1975, those two friends formed their own software company and called it
Microsoft.
Yeah, that's right. That's when Microsoft was invented. The following year, in 1976, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak started Apple Computers. The first Apple computer ever made by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak was made from old parts they collected from free, and they made it in Steve's garage. In 1977, they launched the Apple II computer. This one had colour graphics and a cassette tape drive for storage. Getting close to my Commodore 64, 27 years later. In 1990, Tim Berners-Lee, a British scientist working in Geneva, he began the World Wide Web. Different computers around the world began to talk to each other. In 2005, Nokia started to call some of its mobile phones multimedia computers. In 2008, if smartphones are included as computers, the company that sold the most computers in the world in 2008 was Nokia. I know, what do you think of that, James?
I don't even know what Nokia is.
I know, it's amazing for the younger generation. So before smartphones, mobile phones, Nokia, which is a company in Finland, they made more mobile phones than anybody else. And at first they made more smartphones than anybody else. But do you know what was introduced in 2007?
iPhones.
That's right, the iPhone. And that's probably the biggest reason why you've not heard of Nokia. Because although Nokia got there first, Apple did it better. At least most people would say they did. And so the iPhone became so popular. And Nokia, they still make phones, but they don't sell anywhere near as many as Apple. 2010, the iPad was launched. So that brings us pretty much up to date.
Yeah, but why didn't they make the iPad first? Because isn't making smaller stuff harder to fit into very small stuff?
Yeah, I know what you mean. They had the iPad, or rather tablet computers, were made at an earlier point. They were just big and clunky, not very stylish, pretty heavy, and not very popular. So definitely Apple did not invent tablet-style computers. They just made one that was so good people wanted it. Lots of people.
They made more.
Yeah, they made more and more and more. So from what we've seen today, who do you think invented the first computer? What would you call a computer from the things we've looked at today? I guess that's what I mean.
Something that has electronics in it.
It's got to have electronics in it.
I would say the World War II one, because that had electronics in it.
Yeah, okay, so the computers invented in World War II, there were electronics in Turing's Colossus, but also in 1941, in the middle of World War II, Konrad Zuse in Germany invented a machine called the Z3. So Konrad Zuse, do you remember him?
Yeah, he's the dude that made, working for Hitler and made, stuff like the computers.
Yeah, he was working on a computer that could, remote control missiles. That's right. And Hitler didn't realise how good his inventions were, and so didn't give him enough money to make lots of them. But his Z3 machine was later, many years later, proved to be what's known as Turing, like Alan Turing, who invented Colossus, was proved to be Turing complete. Turing complete means that it's possible to tell this particular computer anything that it's mathematically possible to tell a computer, and it will work it out. It's the world's first modern computer, like many people would say. But it was only proved to be the world's first modern computer in 1991. That's when they actually proved that it could do everything that Zuse wanted it to, and it could do it well. And that's a long time after Hitler lost World War II in 1945.
Well, that's it from Dad and me. If you want us to make more pods, rate, review and share.
And parents, you can check out my novels at paulletters.com.
Bye for now.
From Dad and me love history.
Dad and me love a whole lot of history. We could be the greatest team that the world has ever seen. Dad and me love a whole lot of history.
Here are some questions for after you've listened. And today we've got a couple of special guests helping us out. Say hello, Abby.
Hello.
Say hello, Caleb.
Hello.
What was the name of the calculating machine that they had in ancient China and ancient Babylonia? Over to Caleb for question 2.
Who invented an amazing mechanical robotic clock?
Question 3. What did Leonardo Da Vinci draw but not make?
Question 4. Some people say Charles, who invented the first computer.
Yeah, so what was Charles's surname? Question 5. What did Alan Turing's Colossus computer succeed in doing?
Question 6. Who did Konrad Zuse work for?
Question 7.
In what year was Microsoft created?
And question 8, our last question.
What did Tim Berners-Lee invent in 1990?
Thank you, Abby and Caleb, and you, James.
Dad and me love history. We'll be back after a break for the holidays.
Hello, listener.
Listeners?
Hello, listeners. And so, Mummy, who was a mathematician, maybe she could invent a computer. I don't know.
She's up now. You can hear her.
I know. Can you get something else to eat, and then we are going to have to go and watch the football later. That should do it. Thank you very much, guys. I'll edit that together, and it'll be broadcast to the world today.